Real quick before we get started, I just want to say thank you very much to Panda T for rejoining the Patreon. Welcome back. Happy 2025, everybody. We made it. Again, I'm not going to bother jinxing this year, saying what I hoped for, but we're all thanking it. And yes, once again, it is time for my top 10 video for the preceding year, in this case, 2024. For anyone who's new to the channel, isn't familiar with my top 10s, or just needs a refresher, this is not my top 10 figures that came out in 2024. It's the top 10 figures that I received and experienced in hand for the first time in 2024. So some of these figures are not 2024 releases. Some of them are much older. Some of them may be relatively new, but I originally had like a different version. So it's all over the place. But yeah, let's go over the rules real quick. General rules is, for it to count as part of this video for consideration, it had to be something where the first time I experienced the figure was in 2024. And that means, for example, there are figures that I have, like, say, Legacy Stalker, which is actually Legacy Cyberverse Universe Tarn with repro labels. I really wanted to put that on this list, but I can't because it's the Legacy Tarn mold, and I got the Legacy Tarn mold for the first time in, not last year, but in 2023. So because I already experienced the mold previously, it doesn't qualify. So that's kind of the basic guidelines that I'm using going forward here. And I did not do any cheating, as tempting as it was. I did not do any cheating. I also want to say, Fans Hobby Fright Storm, I've had this for over a year. This was actually in last year's top 10 list, but I recently got repro labels for it, and it looks great, and I love him, and it really upsets me that because of my own rules, I couldn't put him on the list this year because I really, really like this figure. So yeah, that's another example. Also, because this is a top 10, I, of course, always have to clarify because some people just don't understand this. This is my top 10, mine, not anyone else's, mine. So that means there's going to be stuff on this list that people aren't going to agree with, or stuff that they're not going to agree with the placements. And that's fine, but this is my list, so it's not wrong. You can disagree with it, but it's not wrong because you all can't tell me how I feel about toys any more than I can tell you how you feel about toys. I'm not going to look at my list and say, this is how you all should have it organized, because that's not true. Someone's going to value this one figure way more than I do, and vice versa. And that's one of the things that makes collecting like this so cool. It's really nice seeing how much, like how different the perception is that people have among like the same figure. Everyone has different priorities and interests when it comes to these kinds of things. So just keep that in mind as we go through this list. Because one last thing I feel the need to qualify, this is an honest list for me. There's nothing here that I've put in where it is to be controversial or anything like that, because I can guarantee you there's going to be at least one figure on this list where people are going to be like, really? That's where you're putting it? And it's not because I want to drum up controversy or anything like that. It's just because, for me, personally, this is how, this is where that figure ranks for me compared to everything else. I'm not going to spend the entire video qualifying that. It's just something, again, to keep in mind. There are going to be some very weird choices here and some very interesting and disagreeable placements, but that's because this is how I perceived all of this. This is my 2024, this is my experience with these figures, this is just how I feel. This does not invalidate how anyone else feels, just like however anyone else might feel about this list doesn't invalidate my list, okay? We cool? Cool. And why not start things off with a little bit of, oh really, with number 10, that is Legacy Origin Wheeljack. I know so many people don't like this figure, and I understand the complaints about the boxiness and the fact that he just is like one big panel former. I get that, but I still think this is really impressive. He's got great articulation despite how bulky he is, and the fact that this robot opens up and expands to basically become just a hollow plastic crate is actually really cool. Like, yes, it's weird, and there's a lot of cheating or whatever you want to say, but like it's the G1 Cybertron, like Cybertronian version of the vehicle mode. Like that's not gonna, no. because the robot mode was designed to look like his Earth mode. I'm sure you all know what I'm saying, but this is a really cool figure. I was really surprised by how much I like this thing and how much I still like this thing at the end of 2024, because this was a pretty early acquisition for me. So yeah, this is a really neat figure. Well worth checking out if you're curious. But, you know, if you don't like what he's doing, if you don't like how boxy he is, that's cool too. You know, I get it. That's not going to be for everyone. This is definitely for me. Number 9 is also going to be a weird one, but again, this is me. Anyone who's familiar with the channel knows that I have somewhat interesting taste when it comes to figures. But number 9 is QT Starscream. I enjoy the idea of the QT Transformers and whatever else they go by. Like there are other versions, but it's the same basic aesthetic. There are other things, other figures that I've had that I think are kind of neat. Like I've had the Ultra Magnus, I've had the Drift, I've now got the Nemesis Prime, which uses the same mold as the Ultra Magnus, but that also can't count because I had Ultra Magnus. But anyway, this was the first time I experienced what I guess you could call the Seeker mold from this line, and it's really good, but also this is just great. Because it's the Takara version, there's a lot of really nice paint and detailing on it. The articulation for what it is actually pretty good. The transformation is weirdly involved for something this size. Like, it's not complex or anything, but there's more to it than I expected. And it's just a fun little guy that looks fantastic. I love the stylization. I love the colors. It's all just fantastic. And I'm very glad to have this guy, and so glad I put him in my top 10 of the year. Because me. Number 8 is probably one that's not going to be too much of a surprise for people who've experienced this figure, because this whole subline, as brief as it was kind of a big surprise, an impressive surprise to everyone, I think, and that is Reactivate Bumblebee. All of the Reactivate figures are great in their own right, and I stand by that, all of them, but Bumblebee does some really interesting and cool stuff, and for a Bumblebee, this is a really interesting deviation from his usual look. He looks cooler, and again, the transformation on this thing is really interesting in the way it comes together, and I just really like Reactivate Bumblebee. It's good enough that he got his own, or is getting his own standalone release at this point, so I feel like that should tell you everything you need to know if you haven't experienced this figure for yourself. Number 7 is going a bit further back in time than some of the other ones, although I don't know if QT Starscream, I don't know when that came out, but yeah. It's another Wheeljack, interestingly enough, and that is Takara's United Wheeljack. This is the first time I experienced the Classics United mold for Wheeljack or tracks in any capacity, and I was genuinely impressed. I still wish that this whole mechanism could somehow really like lock in place or peg in place so you can't just accidentally shift things down slightly when you're handling him, but it's still a really cool figure, and I'm really glad I got the United version because that metallic paint, specifically the green, looks so good on this guy. The transformation's really interesting. I love how the weapons store to the point where they just vanish into the vehicle mode. The articulation is actually really good. And, you know, for the time, this was really good, but like even for now, it's really darn good. It's a really cool figure. It really makes me appreciate the classic stuff a little bit more. Breakdown, who I have back there, TFCC Breakdown, who's based off of the Sideswipe mold. I'm not as impressed by the Sideswipe Sunstreaker mold, but this, really good stuff. Oh, number 6 is, it's a very me choice. And I feel like I telegraphed this being in the top 10 in some capacity when I made the video early on, because it's not a very complicated figure, and I still managed to make the video, I think it was what, like almost like 45 minutes long or something like that. But it's a really good figure for what it is, and that is Tiny Turbo Changers Cyberverse Grimlock. I am not kidding. I feel like I've said everything I need to say about this guy in the video, so you know, check that out. I'm gonna have all of the figures in this list, except for one, have videos that I've made over the course of the year, so they will all be linked down in the description. So if you want to see everything I have to say about this guy and other Tiny Turbo Changers, check out that video. But this is, for what it is, a perfect Grimlock. It's not the perfect Grimlock, but it's perfect in the sense that as a Tiny Turbo Changers toy, one that only has like 6 parts total, it's really, really good. The articulation is really nice, the transformation is really quick and satisfying to do, but also really effective, and it's neat. He's got posability on like a lot of Tiny Turbo Changers figures, and he just looks really good. He's just fun. He's like this perfect little tiny pocket-sized Grimlock fiddle toy, and he is my favorite Grimlock toy that I own. I'm not saying that makes him the best, but he is my favorite because he's just so tiny and cute and perfect for what he is. All right, before we jump into the top 5, I'm gonna go back and do the honorable mentions because I feel like that's just how you do these lists, right? So first honorable mention, they're kind of tiered. These are basically the figures that would have made it into the top 10 if there were other figures that I didn't get. But first honorable mention goes to Studio Series Bumblebee Movie Sunstreaker. This is a very simple figure, like it's a deluxe, but the transformation is even simpler than that. He's kind of hollow in places, he's definitely compromised in a few ways, but I really like this figure. The design of the robot mode and the design of the vehicle are both really cool. And yes, he looks a little sparse, but you know, there are repro labels for that. It's just like the articulation is pretty solid, the design and detailing is great, and while the transformation is very simplistic, it's also very clever and satisfying to do. And it's like, yeah, it's a simple transformation, but it doesn't need to be complex because he perfectly accomplishes going from one mode to the other in that set structure of steps with that engineering. So like, he didn't need to be any more complicated than he is. This is just a fun, cool figure. Despite everything, I've held on to him this entire year, and I'm glad I did because this was very cool. Next up is one that it may surprise people, may not. It is Studio Series War for Cybertron. I'm not calling it the other thing. War for Cybertron Ratchet. And this is great. It's in my mind at least, it's the best figure in this subline of Studio Series that we've gotten. Optimus Prime is very good. I'm not denying that, but I think this is the best of them so far. Not just because he looks great in both modes, or the transformation is interesting and does some really weird but kind of clever stuff, but like the integration with that gimmick that everyone hates with the forearm that pops off, I love how they handled it with this guy because the gun actually integrates into the arm rather than just looking like a gun is stuck on an arm stump, and the forearm tucks away in the backpack to the point where you can't even tell it's there. It's a really cool, surprisingly intricate little figure, and the only reason he's not in the top 10 proper is because I like so many of the other figures on this list more. Okay, before we talk about this next honorable mention, I want to remind everyone towards the beginning of the video where I talked about how this is my personal list. This is not a commentary on how other people are necessarily wrong or whatever with where they place figures. And I'm not doing this to be controversial. This is just, in my mind, the importance and significance and my enjoyment of these different figures supersedes this one. But the third honorable mention, here we go, goes to Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime. I know. I am not denying the fact that this is an amazing Optimus Prime figure, G1 or otherwise. The engineering on this guy is really cool. He's a really nice figure, feels great. Sucks that they can't install the heels properly, but it's just a cosmetic thing at the end of the day, so that's fine. That has no bearing on this. Like, the articulation is great, the style is great, the transformation is great, the materials feel great. I do not care about the bucket of accessories that he comes with, but I'm also not that bothered by just leaving them off to the side. It's Optimus Prime. We've had so many good Optimus Primes over the years, so many good G1 Optimus Primes over the years, that I'm finding it hard to be that enamored with this. I'm not saying it's not impressive, I'm just saying if you're constantly, like, it's a bad analogy, but if you're constantly being fed like top tier 5-star restaurant meals, you kind of start to get bored of them after a while. You need weirdness, you need imperfections, you need something to break up the monotony, because even extremely good things, if it's the same types, like if it's just increasingly like, oh, this is the best one, oh, this is the best one, oh, this is the best one, that gets boring, at least for me. And because of that, I just don't feel as strongly about this guy as other people, which is, again, I'm acknowledging the fact that this is an amazing Optimus Prime. No question about that, and I do not plan to get rid of him. I like him a lot, but at the end of the day, saying this is an amazing Optimus Prime is like saying, I breathe oxygen. It's just, we get them so often. I want an amazing Optimus Prime that's not G1. fingers crossed on the RID HasLab being as good as it looks, which I did back that, so we'll see. But yeah, like just that kind of thing interests me more than really, really good renditions of G1 again for like the 4th or 5th time in a row. Again, to reiterate once more, this is an extremely good Optimus Prime. That's why he's on the list in the first place. And now, next honorable mention is a very, very Rob thing, and oh, so many people are going to start talking about how, like, you put that above Studio Series 86 Prime, and yes, I did, because, as I said, it comes down to my own level of enjoyment and, you know, interest in the figure. But it's Combiner Force Menasor. I'm not joking. This is not a good figure. They're not individually good figures. They don't need to be fantastic for me to love them, and that's what this list is about. I love this set because Menasor, even though he's just a brick, let's be real, G1 Menasor was equally a brick. I don't care about the fact that he's a brick. He looks cool. This combine mode looks really cool. The individual robots don't look great. The individual vehicles look pretty good aside from Motormaster, but the combine mode looks great. And the actual transformation for everything, even though it's really simple, is fun. It's fun to do. I enjoy playing with this toy. And that is why this is my 4th honorable mention. The only thing that stinks about this thing is the fact that trying to pick one up on the aftermarket is prohibitively expensive. And that's so annoying. But this is a very cool Menasor, and I love it very much. As I'm standing here looking at everything that I've got left to go over, including the final honorable mention in the top 5, the rest of them are actually figures from 2024, so interesting how that works out. But final honorable mention goes to this sort of quiet, long-standing wish fulfillment that I've been wanting for a very long time. And that was, much like you can kind of see him tucked back there, I think, the Fans Toys Road King, the Motormaster. That's been I want a Motormaster, I want a standalone Motormaster. For the longest time, I've wanted a definitive standalone hotspot for myself, and that's what I got with Ocular Max's Ignis. I am not doing the Defensor thing. I don't care about the Defensor thing. It looks good, it's just I don't want it. I don't care about Defensor, really. I don't have an interest in 2 out of the 5 figures that they've released for the Protectobots, or will be releasing for the Protectobots, so I just wanted hotspot. And that's what I got with Ignis. And Ignis is very cool, very large, and hefty. And yeah, there's a lot of engineering stuff in here that I'm not going to be touching because I'm not going to be doing the combine mode. But I don't care. This was wish fulfillment for me. Made me very happy. That's why he is my top honorable mention for 2024. But with that said, everything else that I've got to go over here and everything that I've gone over before him that isn't an honorable mention, I did end up enjoying even more. Okay, now we're in the top 5 proper, and again, as a reminder, I feel like I've been peppering this throughout the entire video, and I'm still going to have people complaining in the comments, but this is my own personal thing. This is how I tier the figures because of me and my own interests and, you know, the things that I enjoy out of them. So yeah, number 5 is Reactivate Soundwave. I know so many people were down on this figure. I personally do not agree with that. Yes, it's a sound wave that turns into a truck. We've seen that before. But the transformation on this is really interesting and surprisingly intricate with like a lot of different things that need to go in specific places if you want to do it right. And if you do it right, this thing locks together really solidly. I love the aesthetic on this guy. He's nowhere near as lanky and annoying looking as he looks in like the product shots because of that weird stretching they did. The articulation is really good. And I quite honestly, as is evidenced by this list, and also spoilers for what's not coming up in the future, I do legitimately rank Soundwave above Bumblebee and even Optimus Prime. Reactivate Optimus Prime is very good, but for me, in terms of interest and fun factor, I much prefer Bumblebee and Soundwave. And Soundwave is just a really good Soundwave. This is a really cool figure. He's fun to mess with. I enjoy transforming this guy. I enjoy just posing this guy. He is a really fun figure, and that's what puts him above Bumblebee for me. Something about this, the way it all clicks together, the way the wheels tuck up into the torso, but in a very specific way so that they actually tab in, all that stuff is just really cool. I guess in some cases I just value engineering over other things. I don't know. It's me. I'm weird like that. My number 4 pick was actually kind of a surprise to me when I was setting up the list, because I thought, due to the theming, I wouldn't even want this thing on the list at all. But when I really stopped to think about it, thought about, the aesthetics of robot and alt mode, the transformation, the engineering, the tactile nature of it all, the fun factor, the articulation, all of that stuff put together, I couldn't deny how much I really enjoyed this thing. So this is me endeavoring to look past my own justified personal biases and acknowledging the fact that I actually do really like this figure. And this figure is very big. Ugh. Mini-Force Justice Titan. It's a copolymer combiner, so it's like 5 different vehicles, no individual robot modes. They all come together to make the one big robot. But like, the individual vehicles are cohesive. The transformation going between the different modes is fun to do. There's really interesting stuff going on with all of them. The articulation on this thing is wild for a Korean combiner, and it just looks really cool. I don't enjoy how much I enjoy this thing. I don't like the cop theme. It's just very But I keep trying to convince myself that this is future cops, where they are actually idyllic law enforcement that actually, enforce laws, rather than, what actual law enforcement does these days. Ignoring all that stuff as much as I can. As a toy, this thing is extremely cool, and I'm very glad to have it. And it annoys me too, because this makes me really miss Mini-Force Animaltron Tricop, because I sold that combiner off a little while back. Really wish I'd kept Tricop, because Tricop was really cool. I've been wanting to get Tricop back, but I don't know. But we're talking about Justice Titan, and Justice Titan is incredibly big and heavy and cool, and has lights and sounds, which I'm not going to show off right now. But I feel like for me to put him at number 4 says a lot, because I don't like... Yeah. Alright, home stretch. Top 3. And this whole list was rough to put together. There are people who were on the Discord who were keeping me company while I was trying to figure out how many, which of the, it was almost 50 figures that qualified this year, and I needed to narrow it down to 15. And they witnessed how much of a struggle it was to get this list put together. And this was just narrowing it down to 15 figures, not actually tiering them. But this was one figure that I knew was going to be on the list in some capacity, ended up at number 3, and that is Metagate's Red Fantasy, their version of Bumblebee Movie Shatter, the one that's an actual triple changer that has a car and a jet mode. Really nice articulation in robot mode, the sculpting is great, the transformation, despite how complex it needs to be to go from a car to a jet to a robot and have them all look at least mildly cohesive, despite that, it's actually a pretty clever and intuitive transformation. There's not a whole lot that doesn't feel, none of it feels overwrought. It doesn't feel overcomplicated. It's not a Toy World or Alien Attack engineering monstrosity. It's actually, for what it is, very straightforward and clever. And the robot just looks amazing. The car and the jet look really good, considering this is a triple changer, and it's a big figure too. Very cool. And I absolutely recommend if this is the kind of thing you're interested in. My number 2 pick is unfortunately the single figure in this entire list that I have not made a video on. That is because once a year I do a theme month. Anyone who's familiar with the channel probably knows where this is going. I do a theme month once a year, and I cover all of the figures that I've gotten in the year of this particular character in that month. This figure came in after that month finished, which means there's going to be a video on this figure next year for the theme month, but I couldn't do the video this year, or 2024, because the month was over, so there's just no way it was going to be part of that theme. So instead of, I don't want to do it as a separate thing, so I'm just waiting till 2025 and the month rolls around again. So yeah, no video on this one. But number 2 is Fans Hobbies Obsidian Commander. This is the not so much Nemesis as the Grand Scourge repaint version of their something commander. I don't know. It's Energon Optimus Prime, or in this case, Energon Grand Scourge. For anyone who's been keeping up with the channel, this is not the first Fans Hobby Nemesis Prime that I've looked at this year, not the first one I've gotten this year. I also have their Naval Commander in black. And that is a really cool figure. It's their version of Armada Optimus Prime, but in Nemesis colors. Really like that figure. But for as much as I like Naval Commander, Obsidian Commander is just the better toy for me. There's just more fun factor to it. The engineering isn't quite as involved, and the combination is really fun to do. I like being able to mix and match the limbs, and the engineering is extremely clever in that regard. And it's just fun to mess with, but even beyond that, the core robot itself is extremely fun to mess with. You strip all these limbs off and transform the center a little bit, you get this other completely awesome standalone Optimus, well, Nemesis Prime Scourge, whatever, and it's just such a cool set. This has been so much fun to play with. It sucks that this is a convention exclusive, but I'm glad that, I guess because of the character and because of probably the price was a factor, because of all that, I actually was able to get a hold of it, even though I didn't realize it had gone up for sale until a couple of days after the sales initially started. I was so worried I was not going to be able to get a hold of this guy because Fans Hobby convention exclusives can be difficult to get. So yeah, very glad I got this because I've been wanting this mold for some time, and when I saw they were finally doing a black repaint, I was like, oh, I need to get that. Oh, it's a convention exclusive, but I got it, and it is just so good. Not my favorite this year, but second favorite, and yeah, this has been a joy. And my number one figure of 2024, this was a bit of a surprise to me because I didn't want this figure at first. I actually was just like, that's cool for those who are into it, but I'm not into it. But a collaboration between a couple of different companies that do their own kits and stuff like that to kind of enhance, or in some cases completely change, a figure. They worked together to create something that was not only very tempting to me, but once I finally got everything together, which took several months because I had to get the figure, then I had to get the upgrade kit, then I had to get the stickers. Putting all of that together made something that was incredibly special to me specifically because of my own history and nostalgia. That, coupled with the fact that it's a really good figure in its own right, but once you change it into this very specific thing that's laser focused on me and my interests, it becomes something incredibly special, and that's why it's my number one. It is Transformers and Ninja Turtles collaborative Party Wallop, but specifically Party Wallop with the non-F upgrade head and hands to turn it into metal head, and the Repro Labels, the Toy Hacks Repro Labels set to really pull out the whole metal head aesthetic. I said as much in the video for this guy, and I made that video before I got the stickers, so things have changed since then, but Metalhead, the original Metalhead toy, was one of those figures that as a child I would just bring with me to places. I feel like most of us know what that's like. As a kid, you have like a handful of toys where you pick one and it accompanies you throughout the day when you go to like run errands with your parents or go to the doctor's office or whatever. Metalhead was one of those figures for me. And so having that represented as a transforming figure, even though it took some upgrades and customization to happen, is just so significant to me as an individual person. And it's been fantastic. And this looks incredible. The figure on its own is very good. Putting on the non-F upgrades to give him proper 3-fingered hands, because for some reason they gave him 5 fingers in the original release, and give him the metal head, that has just, it completely changed this figure for me. But then adding the stickers brings it to a whole other level beyond that. It's fulfilling a wish I didn't even know I had. And it's just incredibly nostalgic and special for me. That is why, of all of these figures that I've looked at and all of the other figures I've messed around with in 2024 for the first time, that is why the freaking Party Wallop, of all things, is my number one. Is that unfair and biased? Absolutely. But this is a top 10 list. I'm not writing a scientific paper. I'm talking about the figures that I find most significant to me. You can't quantify that with numbers or any nonsense like that. It's all feeling and emotion. It is subjective. That's the whole point. I don't know, I'm picturing people giving me a hard time about this. And it's like, it's fine if you disagree, but you're not going to convince me that this isn't special for me. That's just not how this works. So this is my number one. If you don't like that, I apologize, but I feel like I've made it clear, and I hope that I've made you able to understand why this is my number one choice. I'm bringing Frightstorm back out because I just really like this guy, even though he wasn't part of the list. But that has been my top 10 video for 2024. I'm sure there are going to be plenty of disagreements here. I feel like I could hear people gasping in horror when I showed Optimus Prime, Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime, as an honorable mention just while recording this video, let alone posting it. As I said, subjective list, that's how these things go. But yeah, that's been my top 10. It's been really a heck of a year, and this is a lot of stuff I'm looking forward to in 2025. So that has been all of my weird, scattered, tenuously justified picks for my top 10 figures of 2024. I'm curious to know, what are some of your top 10 figures for the year? It could be whatever. Let's not poo-poo other people's choices. If someone posts their own list in the comments and you don't agree with it, that's fine, but don't be mean about it. There's so much meanness happening in the fandom and just online in general these days. We don't need that. Critical, sure. Mean, no. Let's try to not do that, you know? Ignore that thing in your head that's like that knee-jerk defensive reaction when someone posts a figure you like in a place you wouldn't put them, or doesn't have a figure you like on the list. Just be cool, is what I'm saying. But that's it. Thank you all for watching. Next video is going to be another actual figure video, but this is just something I do once a year as tradition, and doing it again this year. Also, look forward to April, because I do a joke video once a year too, and sometimes people don't seem to realize that it's a joke video, which is, in a way, even funnier. No idea what it's going to be, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you. See you all later.